let's talk about reading music. It's kind of like reading a page of a book, but instead of figuring out what all of those letters and words sound like, you're figuring out what all of those notes and rhythms sound like. To be able to read music, we have to get familiar with the 5 lines. And the 5 lines, yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the 4 spaces between those lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, are called the staff. Now on this page, I have 2 of them, and this one has a sign called a treble clef, and this one has a sign called a bass clef. The difference is that any note that appears on the treble clef staff, maybe on a space, maybe on a line, any of those notes are going to be notes that have a kind of a higher sound, and they need to be played by a higher sounding instrument, or an instrument that at least plays some high notes and maybe some low notes too. If you see the bass clef staff and you see notes on it, then you'll know that any of the notes that appear on the bass clef staff on a line or a space are going to be lower sounding notes, and therefore they need to be played by an instrument that plays low notes. Do you know any instruments that play low notes and high notes? I do. The piano. That's right, when you're reading piano music, you will probably see one of these for the notes on this end, and you'll probably see one of these for the notes on this end. Now we're going to check out the line notes of the treble staff. There's your treble clef. If you ever see a note circling the bottom line of the treble clef, it's called an E. That E could be colored in, it might have a line beside it, it might even have a little tail off the end, or it could be connected to other notes. It could even have a dot beside it. In any case, if it is circling that bottom line, it's called an E. Any note that circles the second line is a G, the third line is a B, the fourth line is a D, and the fifth is an F. So a clever way of remembering E, G, B, D, F is elephants get big, dirty feet. Pretty funny, huh? Sometimes you might see notes that are not on the staff, but they're still line notes, like this one, which is underneath the staff. It still has a line going through it, and this one is called a C. So if you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. And here are the space notes. If you ever see a note on the treble clef staff that is in the bottom space, it's called an F. If there's one in the second space, it's called an A. In the third space, it's called a C. And in the fourth space, it's called an E. Do we really need a sentence to remember F-A-C-E? No, it spells a word. What's this word? Face. That's how we can remember the names of the spaces in the treble clef. Sometimes you'll see notes that are space notes but that are not on the staff, like the F-A-C-E, such as this one. This note is called a D. Keep your eye out for that one. You might see it very soon. Now you might be wondering, now that we know what these notes are called, how do we know how to play them on our instrument? Well, it's pretty easy on an instrument like the xylophone, because the xylophone actually says what the notes are that you have to hit. So, for example, this very first note here is on the second line. Remember those line notes? Elephants get big, dirty feet. Well, that would make this a G, because it's on the second line. Well, then we just play the G. I mean, that's easy enough. You just hit the G. So a xylophone piece of music is pretty easy to play because you don't have to memorize where the notes are. This song would sound like this. Playing a song on the recorder, like this song, Ode to Joy, is a little more complicated because the recorder doesn't say on it where the notes are and what they're called. You actually have to learn the fingering. So here I have a fingering chart that tells you how to play the C and the D and the E and the F and all the other notes that are on the staff, and particularly the treble clef staff, because the recorder that I'm using, which is a soprano recorder, only plays the high notes. So we're going to use the treble clef staff again, and I have to remember that my very first note, which is on the third line up, do you remember the third line note? Elephants get big. It's a B. That third line B is actually played like this. Okay, so I have to put down the thumb hole and I have to put down my first finger. So I'm going to start by playing a B. And when I play the song, it will sound like this. Let's check out Hot Cross Buns, which is our first recorder song, and it's only got 3 different notes in it, so this should be pretty easy. Remember that there are 5 lines on the staff. So when we're looking at this very first note, you can see that I labeled it, but I want to tell you how I got there. It's not on the first line, it's not on the second line. This note is on the third line. Elephants get big. That makes it a B. And I called it a B1 because 1 is the fingering for this note, which I'm going to show you very soon. And let's check out the third note of the song. I'm going to hop over here. This is also a line note because it has a line going through it, but it's not the first line, so it's not elephants, but it's the second line. Elephants get, and that's why I called it a G. Now let's look at the second note of the song. This one is not a line note. This one is actually a space note, and the space note names are F, A, C, and E. So this one is the second one, called an A. That's how we came up with B, A, G, and the 1, 2, 3 that I wrote has to do with the fingering of these notes. So you'll see soon how I came up with that 1, 2, 3. But first I want to have you look at something else. You'll notice that these 3 notes and these 3 notes look awfully familiar, and that's because we saw them right here. These are the exact same notes. This is a B, this is an A, this is also a G, and the same thing over here. So when you're labeling with your pencil, you can write those notes in, and when you learn how to play them, you can play them exactly the same as you did in that very first measure of music right here. And this other measure is actually not too far off from those. It has the same, it has 2 of the 3 notes, but they look a lot different because they've got these connecting lines and they're a little closer together. But don't let that distract you too much. These are actually the same notes. I want you to figure them out for yourself, but I'll just remind you that the line notes are elephants get big dirty feet. So you can figure out which note these 4 notes are called, which name these 4 notes are called. And then over here, these notes are space notes, so I will just remind you that the space notes are F, A, C, E. so you can figure out what those 4 notes are too. So now that we know that Hot Cross Buns has the 3 notes B, A, G in it, yes, that does spell a word, isn't that cute? Now we can learn how to play B, A, G. Now you might remember that I had B1, A2, and G3. Well, here's why. When you play your B, you're going to be looking right here at what that looks like on the staff, but also the fingering on the recorder. And the fingering shows you that the thumb hole is down. This is the thumb hole, and I don't count that when I say B1. I almost always have the thumb hole down anyway, but what I'm looking at is this row of holes. And on your recorder, that would be right here. It's the front of your recorder, and you'll see that I have 1 finger down plus my thumb hole, but that 1 finger down is what I mean when I say 1. B1, that means the B is played by putting 1 finger down plus your thumb. And the other note that we're going to look at here is A. Here's the A on my chart. This is what it looks like on the staff. F-A-C-E, looks just like that. The second space, is circled. And yes, again, the thumb hole is down, but when I call it an A2, I'm talking about these 2 holes being covered. And here's a picture of what that looks like. You can see that I have 2 fingers down on the front of my recorder plus the thumb. But I don't count the thumb when I'm saying A2. I just mean there are 2 fingers on the top plus the thumb. And here's the fingering again. You can see that it's got 2 black holes covered on the front plus the thumb. And lastly, you'll need to know how to play the G. That's what it looks like on the staff. And you can see in this picture, on this fingering chart, that there are 3 holes covered plus the thumb hole. And this is what it looks like when you're playing it. 3 fingers are down plus the thumb hole. I'm going to point to the notes as I play them. And before I do, I want to remind you that I am using my left hand. And yes, the recorder is played with your left hand on top. Whether you are left-handed or right-handed, doesn't matter. The left hand goes on top just like it would when you're playing the clarinet in the band or the flute or any other woodwind instrument. And don't worry, right-handers, later on we'll be putting that right hand on the bottom on the harder notes, and you'll be glad that your right hand is down there. But for now, the left hand goes on top, and when you put it all together, it sounds like this. Let's end with a piece of music for the piano. You can see that it has a treble clef for the notes that are up high and a bass clef for the notes that are down low. Happy practicing! Here's the song that we're going to do first.